All right, we continue our conversation then in studio tonight. We're looking at the International Day to End Violence Against Women and Children. It is a global campaign, and of course South Africa being one of the many countries that participates in this particular period of 16 days of 16 days campaign of to end violence against women and children. Khanyisa Booi from the Sexual Reproductive Health for Your Information campaign manager, and Reverend Bafana Khumalo, he's the executive director of Sonke Gender Justice, remain with me in studio to continue our conversation. Khanyisa, before we went to break, you're raising an issue around the national emergency and the sense of crisis in the country. Reallocated from different departments to expedite whatever interventions that government needs to work on in the fight against gender-based violence. Today we also had the president saying in Limpopo that they'll try and commit more money to ensure that there is greater effort in this initiative.
So I don't even know if I want to call it a dissatisfaction. I just feel like between the summit last year and this year, the movement has been very small. The public outcry on cases of cyber crimes, missing persons, young girls dying, young women dying, hasn't been met with a sense of urgency. And yes, the importance of resources, as I initially spoke to, is there. But what is it that a government can do when it's women and children are dying? What is a government to do when children are going missing every day and they're not found, right? And so when you say, okay, fine, Nanzi Mali, use this money as resources to be able to work this out, what are you actually saying when the strategic plan that is being contributed to has not even set for you to look at and say, where are we channeling this? How are we working this out? How are we making sure that the recommendations made by the total shutdown are now being followed through? How do we bring in civil society to do the work? I'm of the understanding that there is a sitting that's going on tomorrow to unstereotype gender-based violence. I think it's the UN Women is going to be present. I'm not really sure where it's going to be. And so I'm not saying that there are no efforts. I'm just saying the haste and the sense of urgency is still not existent. You can't have someone being stabbed namhlanje 52 times when you know as a government that this is happening. Somebody got killed at a post office. And yes, the justice process was hastened for that case because the media was involved. What of other cases? What of other people that go missing? And is under-resourced. If there's some level of intelligence that needs to exist, why are we not having that conversation? Sure. Why is that not happening?
Reverend Khumalo, given how gendered then this violence is, and it's, you know, violence by men against women, violence by men against other men, it seems to me that men should be the one leading this conversation, and yet very few times do we find men doing that. Your organization is one of very, very few in the country. Why is it not changing?
Well, Cathy, I'm a bit sad to say there are voices that are coming to the space, men's organizations, so-called, but those voices, I'm afraid, are not useful, some of them. I mean, the narrative that men are protectors, you know, our women.
Irks me up a little bit more than the others.
And so I always challenge my fellow men to say, look, women are women in their own right, with dignity. They don't need to be protected by anybody. You know, what we need is to stop men behaving in the manner that they are behaving. Now, at Sonke, we chose this year to say, look, this is not about fanfare, having events and jolling around, because this is serious. And so we have our own theme for 16 days. We're calling it 16 days of accountability. So the issues that Khanyisa has been raising, we are beginning to ask the questions. The 1.2 billion that has been allocated, where is it? What has happened? We are encouraging communities to go to police stations. Do we have enough rape kits? Are cases being conducted correctly? The promises that have been made by churches, you know, I'm sad today I saw a tweet of a leading clergy who said disparaging remarks about a fellow clergy, a woman clergy in a particular church, writing on Twitter almost in victory that he has been exonerated by his church. Very misogynistic in the message that he's been sending. Now, that is part of the problem, that we've got systemic structures that continue to perpetuate this kind of permissibility of this kind of behavior. Because as long as men don't feel that there's a sense of accountability, why would they stop violence against women?
Why is it so hard to get men on board in, number one, I think being able to have the conversation, just to begin with, and of course, conversation begins, it will lead to some kind of further changes that may ultimately result in a just behavior.
Yeah. We are seeing some of that, but I don't think it's happening nearly enough. I mean, Khanyisa has just made a point. Civil society in this country does a lot of work that should be done by government. But who provides the resources? You know, at Sonke Gender Justice, most of the resources we get is from philanthropic organizations, very little money from government. Even as we are working in partnership with government on issues that are affecting the national life of this country. Now, I'm saying if our government can find money to bail out SOEs that are failing every day, dropping money into bottomless pits, and yet we have a national emergency, and the money cannot be found. The president still talk about, we will find the money. I would have expected that by now, given the gravity of the situation. We know that the NSP has been almost finalized. We should be talking about how much money has been allocated already, so that we begin to get systems in. Cathy, we're going to get that strategic plan. It's beautiful, it's a good document, as we always do in South Africa. Implementation, I am very skeptical.
All right.
I'm very skeptical. And until we get to the level where there is accountability by all the duty bearers, we will not turn the tide against gender-based violence.
Sure. We're going to have to leave it there for tonight. Let me thank you both for your time and for engaging on this matter, Khanyisa Booi and Reverend Bafana Khumalo.